Now it's time for today's perspective on the programme. And my guest today is a woman who knows more than anyone about the effects of war on the people of Ukraine. Oleksandra Matviichuk is head of the human rights organisation, the Centre for Civil Liberties Ukraine, the centre that in 2022 won the Nobel Peace Prize. She works tirelessly to speak on peace, women's issues, the plight of the vulnerable, as well as working to document the war crimes in Ukraine, campaigning as well for the release of illegally imprisoned people in Russia and the occupied Crimea, and as well campaigning for democratic reforms inside Ukraine. Well, she's here in France for various events, including Ukraine and Souffle de Liberté, or a Wind of Liberty, at the Theatre of Concord, which starts tonight for 3 nights. And she joins us here on set. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us on the programme. Thank you for the invitation. Such a list of obviously interlinked, but at the same time different issues that you campaign for. And I thought we could tackle a few of them one at a time. I mean, firstly, war crimes in Ukraine. Of course, there have been many of them.
When large-scale war started, we united our efforts with dozens of organizations from different regions and built a national network of local documentators. We covered the whole country, including the occupied territories, and working together, we jointly documented more than 91,000 episodes of war crimes. And while this war turns people into the numbers, we are returning people their names.
91,000, I mean, it's an incredible number. How on earth can you document all of that?
We use different sources of information. We gathered testimonies of victims and witnesses of war crimes. We sent mobile groups to work in the occupied territories. We analyze open data with further verification, is the truth or not. And if something happened, for example, Russia hit the biggest children's hospital in Kiev, where children were treated from cancer, we are able to immediately send our local documentators to make photos, videos, speak with people, and describe what's happened. We live in the 21st century. We have digital tools which help us to analyze what's going on, to communicate with people in occupied territories, to identify perpetrators, which we can't even dream 30 years ago during the Balkans War.
Great to document it, important to document it. Do you think, though, that one day anyone will actually be held accountable for any of them?
I have no doubt. All this hell, which we now face in Ukraine, is a result of total impunity, which Russia enjoyed for decades. Russian troops committed horrible crime in Chechnya, in Moldova, in Georgia, in Mali, in Libya, in Syria, in other countries of the world. They have never been punished. They believe they can do whatever they want. We must break this circle of impunity, not just for people in Ukraine, but in order to prevent a next Russian attack to the next nation.
Let's talk about some of the other issues as well, those illegally imprisoned in Russia and, of course, in occupied areas of Ukraine.
We have thousands and thousands of people who were legally detained. According to international law, Russia has no right to detain civilians, but Russia did in enormous scope. I personally interviewed hundreds of people, men and women, who survived Russian captivity. They told me how they were beaten, raped, smashed into wooden boxes, their fingers were cut, their nails were torn away, their nails were drilled. They were electrically shocked through the genitalia. One woman told me how her eye was dragged out with a spoon. So, knowing this detail, we have a clear understanding that part of these people have no chance to be alive till the end of Trump's peace talk. So we must be vocal that Russia must release them as quickly as possible.
You mentioned women there. I know that's something that you also campaign for specifically.
Yes, and this is a very sad story because sexual abuse are widespread in Russian prison. Let me illustrate it because it's not just numbers, it's human beings. Just recently, I met a 5-year-old girl occasionally in Kiev, and we work with the case of her mother. Her mother is civilian, she lived in occupied territories, she has empathy to Ukraine, that's why she was abducted. It's not a crime for citizens in Ukraine to have empathy to their country, but she was illegally detained and she went through multiple gang rape. And then she was illegally transported to Russia and faced fabricated criminal case. And probably adults told to this small girl that I'm an important person, being a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. So she reached me, she hugged me, she started crying, and she started to beg me, please return my mom. And I felt broken. I'm a professional human rights lawyer. I have no legal tools how to return her mom.
So do you feel like you're doing what you can within, obviously, the incredible limits that you face?
We are not doing enough. We are not doing enough. Even here in France, a lot of people have no idea what Russia is doing in occupied territories.
And how can you put a stop to that? How can you improve that situation so that people do understand?
I'm here on the TV and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. And we launched international campaign which called People First campaign. And we have different NGOs in France who joined to this campaign and support our efforts. So our thought is that if a lot of people in France and other countries will join to this campaign and we share this demand that people first in all political negotiations, we will succeed.
How difficult is it to get your voice heard? I mean, there are obviously lots of other issues around the world which are also trying to get their stories, if you like, out there so that people understand.
We know that Ukraine is not just a hotspot in the globe. Unfortunately, there are a lot of other wars and unhuman regimes who persecute and murder their own citizens. But people in France and people in the European Union, they have no luxury not to pay attention to what's going on in Ukraine. Because if we not be able to stop Putin in Ukraine, he will go further and attack next country. He sees Ukraine as a bridge to Europe. His logic is historical. He dreams about his legacy. He wants to forcibly restore Russian Empire. And empire has a center, but has no borders. Empire always strives to expand.
You also campaign within Ukraine as well. I mean, last week, of course, there was a scandal of corruption within the Ukrainian government. We've also had President Trump calling for elections within Ukraine as well. I know that democratic reform is something you feel very strongly about.
I think Ukrainians don't need lessons about election. We don't need to be lectured. In 2004, millions of people in Ukraine stood up their voice during Orange Revolution when our right to vote was stolen. So we value election. We value the right to vote. The problem is with the Russian war, because during the war, you can't hold election. It's prohibited by Ukrainian constitution. It's prohibited by French constitution. And yes, when the war will stop and we will get security guarantees, that it's not just a pause for several days and several months, so we can concentrate to recover our country and all democratic procedures, we will organize elections. There is no problem with it.
Amid everything you just said, what drives you? What drives you personally as a human being to do what you're doing?
I know that all our efforts matter. There is no modest efforts when you face with such existential threat as a war, and always I'm inspired by people in Ukraine. I'm a human rights lawyer. I have no legal tools how to stop Russian atrocities, but I know that I can rely on people, and ordinary people can have a much great power that they even imagine. Ordinary people will change history.
And bearing in mind that as well, I mean, is it possible still to have hope, to think that change will come?
I have to say that we must to define the word hope properly. Hope, it's not a confidence that everything will be fine. Hope, it's a deep understanding that all our efforts have a huge meaning.
Good to have you with us on the programme today. Thank you very much for
for
coming in
invitation.
and talking to us, Oleksandra Matviichuk, head of the human rights organisation, the Center for Liberties Ukraine, the centre that won the Nobel Peace Prize back in 2022. So good to have you with us, talking to us on the specific today when the Nobel Peace Prize should be handed over for 2025. Thanks very much once again.